Hello, and welcome to the Vertical Drop Viking. I'm Josef, and today I want to talk to you about the latest addition at Cedar Point, the Siren's Curse Tilting Coaster by Dutch manufacturer Vekoma. We'll go over a history of the tilting coaster, with a particular focus on the Vekoma model, and this ride specifically, and I'll give you a review of its forces, theming, and overall ride experience. Let's dive into it. Siren's Curse is a Vekoma tilt coaster, one of 4 currently standing in the world. It is actually not a custom layout, but the first installation of their cliffhanger model, the larger of their 2 off-the-shelf models. The more compact Pitfall model has not been installed anywhere in the world yet, but is available for purchase on their website. The installations at Six Flags Qiddiya and Codaland are new custom layouts, and the original is a custom layout as well. The Vekoma tilt coaster was first introduced in 2002. It narrowly missed being the first coaster in the world with a tilting element, being edged out of this distinction by Winja's Fear and Force, a Mauer ride built in Germany in March of 2002. Winja's Fear and Force is a dual-tracked spinning coaster that features a tilting section on its left side and 2 tilting sections on its right side. All 3 of the tilting sections on this ride were utilized in dark ride sections of the ride and sent the train back in the direction that it came, but on a lower piece of track, so the tilt was diagonal. This would prove to be a quite different approach to what Vekoma would do when they constructed Gravity Max at Lipaoland in Taiwan. Gravity Max is the first coaster in the world to feature a full 90-degree tilt section, utilizing the tilt coaster mechanism not to return the train diagonally, but to send it down its lift hill with a sheer vertical drop. The tilt section of this model is designed to lock the trains in place for the entirety of the swinging motion, and to hold them there for several seconds beyond, maintaining a long, anxious moment of suspense for riders before they're released into a tunnel. This tunnel begins turning left into a half helix, which leads riders right into a tight vertical loop. Leaving this loop, riders enter into a 540-degree helix that sends them into the final brake run. At 1,863 feet of track, this isn't a particularly long ride, but the gimmick of the suspended first drop hits hard and made this ride the must-ride attraction at Lipao Discoveryland. Vekoma, however, would go bankrupt early in its construction, which would begin a slow and long restructuring of the company that would eventually lead it from its reputation as the butchers who brought us the SLC and the inverted boomerang, and elevate them to the esteemed position that they hold in the industry today. After Gravity Max opened in 2002, it would be 12 years before any manufacturer would build another ride with a tilting section. This time it would be Intamin, the company typically known for extreme forces and speed. But in this case, they installed tilt sections on a hybrid dark ride / spinning ride, Harry Potter, and the Escape from Gringotts. Now, this utilizes a diagonal lift like the one on Winja's Fear and Force, in conjunction with 3D projection screens to give riders an immersive experience. This was designed in-house by Universal's creative department, and it would be the last coaster with a tilt section outside of China for 11 more years. During this time, the tilt mechanism and design for Gravity Max was copied by the infamous Jinma Rides, a company notorious for stealing ride designs and selling knockoff versions within the borders of China. Like Intamin and Maurer, Jinma could only manage to make the tilting section of the knockoff rides diagonal. Gravity Max stood alone as the only coaster in the world with a tilt section that goes from horizontal to vertical for 23 full years. Now, I cannot find or present to you today any proof that Lipao Discoveryland and Vekoma had a deal that Vekoma wouldn't manufacture another tilting coaster for 20 years. I also don't know that Vekoma would be subject to the terms of that deal after their corporate restructuring. However, it is common for companies to purchase exclusivity for a particular ride, like you won't beat this ride that you're building for us. You won't beat it for X years, and we'll pay you this money. That's fairly common practice in the industry. It's expensive, but it's fairly common practice. And that may be what happened here, or it could be just the way that the stars aligned. But either way, it took a full 20 years from the time that Gravity Max was built before they started working on another tilting coaster. Whether or not such a deal existed, in 2022, Vekoma began manufacturing another tilting coaster 20 years after Gravity Max. This coaster was initially referred to as Cliffhanger. This coaster was originally slated to be purchased by Energylandia in Poland. This is a massive amusement park, one of the largest in Europe, and it was subsidized with funds provided by the European Union as part of their Smart Growth or Intelligent Development operational program. Now, these EU funds were later diverted, and the park ceased to receive these subsidies, most likely as a result of the escalating Russian invasion of neighboring Ukraine. And the park was left without the funds to purchase the coaster that Vekoma had already started manufacturing. Now, word got out that Vekoma had a tilt coaster, another tilt coaster, a real one, the second real one in the world, really. And it was already manufactured, and it's for sale, and allegedly for a mere $12 million. Six Flags Corporation wrote the check, and the ride was shipped from Poland all the way to Mexico City, Mexico. Now, Six Flags Mexico planned on erecting the ride as the world's second 90-degree tilt coaster, the first in over 20 years, and they planned on theming it to Harley Quinn. Six Flags famously has all the DC licensing. So the title of the ride was meant to be Harley Quinn Tilted Insanity. Now, here in the parking lot of Six Flags Mexico, the ride's components sat in pieces for quite some time. Coaster Tube first noticed its presence in June of 2024. Now, Six Flags Mexico isn't a park that's regularly visited by the mainstream coaster channels. So just how long it sat in that parking lot before somebody noticed, that's hard to say. What is known is that it was fated to stay in pieces there. The government in Mexico City refused to give them the permits to erect the coaster. Facing the prospects of an expensive legal battle against the municipal government just to install this ride at one of their second-string parks, Six Flags decided to pivot. 1 month after the ride was spotted in the parking lot at Six Flags Mexico, Six Flags completed their purchase of Cedar Fair. Now, this merger brought many of North America's greatest amusement parks under one corporate umbrella, with all the benefits and drawbacks that can bring. Meanwhile, at Cedar Fair's flagship park, the 2024 season was going tremendously wrong. Now, to start, there was the natural uncertainty that comes along with your parent company going through a merger with your primary competitor. On top of that, the company's flagship ride for the 2024 season, Top Thrill 2, broke down after only 6 days of operation, and the operation was spotty at that. After having dedicated millions of dollars to converting this ride from a hydraulic launch to an LSM launch, and an untold amount more money in advertising the ride and billing it as their main attraction for the year, to say this left egg on Cedar Fair's face that their ride ran for 6 days would be a bit of an understatement. At this point, Six Flags enters the chat. They've got a new flagship park, Cedar Point's theirs now, and that flagship park has a lot of angry season ticket holders who don't get to ride their shiny new ride. They paid for it, they don't get it, and they're mad. The solution at this moment was clear to them. Give concessions to the angry pass holders, fix Top Thrill 2 as soon as humanly possible, and get the $12 million pile of track that's sitting in Mexico City up to Ohio as soon as possible. Park management at Cedar Point was notified that they're going to be receiving the coaster in 3 weeks. And you're going to get a new coaster in 3 weeks. Make it work. It's on the way. So they immediately settled on a nautical theme right out of the gate. The park had already removed the employee dorms and the Schwarzkopf Wildcat from the proposed footprint, and they announced that the coaster would be called Siren's Curse on September 19th of 2024. Now, during the month of September, the site was prepped for construction, and construction began in the off-season as soon as the park closed after Halloween weekends. The park closed for the year on Saturday, November 2nd, and the track began to arrive at the park on Sunday, November 3rd. The Adena Corporation from Mansfield, Ohio, constructed the ride. The foundations were dug throughout November, and the concrete footers were poured in late November and through December. As Christmas 2024 approached, the tower that would hold the tilt mechanism began its slow climb up the Erie skyline. The first piece of track was installed on January 30th, 2025. The 45-ton tilt section was installed in that tower on February 4th, 2025, just a few days before my birthday. The lift hill finished construction in March. By mid-April, the ride was 80% constructed and on track to open with the park. But then there were issues with the electronic sensor system, and that delayed the opening to late June. Siren's Curse opened to the public on June 28th, 2025. Now, the first month of operations for Siren's Curse was plagued with the same electronic problems that delayed its opening. Within that first 4 weeks, the ride failed to dispatch from the tilt section 4 times, leaving riders stranded on the tilt track until they could be manually rescued and escorted down the tilt tower staircase. The tilt section, dangerous as it may seem to the naked eye, is actually an incredibly carefully controlled piece of tech. There are hundreds of sensors throughout the ride, carefully monitoring the position of both trains, the position of the tilt track mechanism, and the locking mechanism on top of that track. There are redundant sensors on top of redundant sensors. Each and every little bolt has to be lined up just so, in position A, before the ride will tilt. Once the ride is tilted, each and every little bolt has to be just lined up, just so, in position B, before the train will dispatch from the tilt into the drop. Each of these redundant sensors on each little section of interlocking track have to show a positive result before the ride will operate. If 3 of the 4 sensors on the left side of the tubular piece of steel that fits to form the drop show that all systems are fine, and then one of those sensors, a 4th sensor, is showing a fault, the ride is a fault, and the ride will not operate. You will not be dispatched. Now, with that incredible level of safety and redundancy on safety, and the incredibly low tolerances that the ride's multiple redundant sensors are permitting, the fact that this ride operates at all is a testament to its engineering and construction. The ride is so safe that the only thing that's gone wrong with it since it's opened is that it's failed to dispatch because it's trying to be too safe. In spite of that, local Ohio news outlets jumped on the story that Siren's Curse keeps breaking down, causing a bit of confusion as to whether the ride was actually safe for the general public. In case you're still confused while you're watching this, I'm here to assure you. The worst thing that can happen to you on Siren's Curse is that the ride's mind-boggling number of safety mechanisms don't read 100%, and you are safely walked back down to Earth. Now, the ride layout is great. I have no complaints about the actual ride experience itself. The climb to the top is real quick and exciting. The onboard audio really goes a long way as far as theming the ride. The view from the top is good, although Valraven definitely has it beat here. I think Cedar Point knows this because the Sunrise Tour is still on Valraven. It could be on their brand new shiny coaster, but it's still on Valraven. The tilt section is awesome. It's a gimmick, yes, but so is the dive drop on Valraven right next door, and I love the gimmick on both of them. I would say that the forces of the B&M drop are a little bit better. You fall for a lot longer. You're in 0G for a lot longer while you're falling. And then the positives at the bottom of Valraven's parabola are a little bit stronger, but neither Valraven nor Siren's Curse have like strong maintained positive Gs. Neither of these drops are going to be enough to gray you out at the bottom. Unlike on the B&M coaster next door, this gimmick actually works better in the back. I strongly recommend, if you're going to ride Siren's Curse, I strongly recommend the back. As if you're in the back, or even if you're rear of the center of the train, then the tilt track is going to lift you up. And if you're in front of the center of the train, the tilt track is actually going to bring you down towards the remainder of the course. Now, after the first drop, Siren's Curse has a much more interesting layout than Valraven next door. And the onboard metal soundtrack is surprisingly effective during the entire course of the ride at maintaining this intensity. In case you're curious, metalheads, yes, this soundtrack does kind of gent. Now, compared to Valraven, the layout's much more snappy. It's got lots of quick laterals and good pacing. After the vertical drop, there's sort of a vertical left corkscrew element that brings you down into the trench, and that leads you back up into an airtime hill that immediately transitions to a twisting dive. You pull out of that into the first of two great heartline rolls through a windy S-bend that feels sort of like a modern version of an old school trick track. And that's followed by a tunnel that was running a mist machine all summer and a fog machine during Halloween weekends. You come up out of that tunnel and into a tight Immelman turn, up, left, and out, and you barely leveled out from that Immelman when you bank 100 degrees to the right and helix around to meet the second heartline roll. Now, after that second heartline roll, there's an off-axis airtime hill, there's a series of snappy turns, and it brings you right back around to the brake run. Now, this ride doesn't give you any of the soaring airtime, the soaring floater airtime that Valraven features, but it's definitely also not trying to. The similarities between this and Big Brother Valraven Next Door begin and end at the top of the lift hill. If I had to pick one standout feature of this coaster design as a selling point, besides the tilt track obviously, it would be the snappiness of the banking. This thing rotates you around the track with a quickness on par with Maverick or Raptor. It's not trying to keep you out of your seat the whole time like Steel Vengeance, and it's not trying to peel tears out of your eyes like Millennium Force or Top Thrill 2. And it's certainly not trying to make you feel like you're flying like Valraven or Gatekeeper. But through a combination of the gimmick that it has, and its whippy laterals and rapid-fire rotational elements, Siren's Curse does its own thing. And it does it very well. And ultimately, that's the number one thing I look for when I'm judging a coaster's place in a park's lineup is, what are you trying to do? How well do you do it? I think Siren's Curse succeeds at what it's trying to do. Now, my criticisms of this coaster. My number one criticism of this coaster is the capacity. I understand that this coaster was rushed to Cedar Point. I understand that Cedar Point wasn't its first choice. It wasn't where it was going to be built. But it is insane to have the newest, hottest, and flashiest coaster at Cedar Point, the primary draw for the summer, only operate 2 trains. I know it's not a decision that someone made. It's a consequence of the reality that the company found itself in. But now, today, it's the reality that we find ourselves in as coaster fans. This ride has a 2-hour wait, 1 hour into the park opening. The average queue time for this coaster all season was 80 minutes. The average queue time for this coaster at 11 p.m., right before the park closed, was an hour. So if you queued up for this coaster at 11 p.m., you were nearly guaranteed to come off the coaster to a closed park. The theoretical capacity for this ride is only 1,000 riders an hour. And in a park that averages 4 million visitors over a 6-month season, it's simply not enough. The ride is going to be slammed until the day it closes. There's no way for the park to mitigate it. Add in the mandatory locker system, and the riders trying to bring their glasses and fanny packs onto the ride in defiance of that mandatory locker system. You got a bit of a perfect storm for long lines. This ride is always going to have a killer wait. Now, my second criticism of this ride is that in spite of its obvious differences with Valraven, it really doesn't do anything better than it, besides, obviously I said before, it's whippier, it's more laterals, it's faster, it's a less graceful, more intense ride than Valraven. But ultimately, it's sitting next to another coaster whose gimmick is whose public-facing gimmick is, we're going to bring you up to the top, we're going to make you look down, we're going to make you wait, and then we're going to drop you. It's almost like it's a wine tasting event for coaster enthusiasts. Like, here we have a pairing of the B&M Vertical Dive Coaster and the Vekoma Vertical Dive Coaster. Both feature suspense and rolling inversions. Please enjoy. Like, that's all well and good. I'm happy I get to ride them both. As far as the people coming in and paying the bills are concerned, you kind of got 2 coasters in the middle of your park that do the same thing. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have these 2 coasters right next to each other. Valraven being a good 60 feet taller doesn't help Sirens in this regard at all. One of the things you see in your incredible view of the park from the top is the ride that does the same thing, but towering over you. So the ride can't put as many people through, and it doesn't go nearly as high, which puts it down a couple of notches. But it is, again, much more whippy when you're actually in the layout. So for fans of intensity and laterals, anyone who finds floater airtime to be boring, Sirens is going to be your pick out of the two. It's not even close. Like, if you don't like floater, if you don't like the gracefulness of slower pace B&M, Siren's Curse is going to be your pick out of the two every single time. Siren's Curse feels aggressive, where Valraven feels graceful. So this criticism of the coaster actually cuts in both directions, though. Valraven looks like it's Siren's Curse's big brother, but the fact that Siren's Curse actually offers a more aggressive and intense ride experience scratches a little bit of the proverbial polish off of Valraven too. Siren's Curse, being where it is devalued by and devalues the $25 million B&M coaster next door. When all said and done, while I think capacity and comparison are both valid criticisms of the ride, neither of them are criticisms of the ride experience itself. The ride experience is great. The stats are subpar for Cedar Point, but the layout really and truly makes the most out of those stats. The gimmick hits, and then the elements after the gimmick are just really done well. Now, standout elements for me are that first dive loop after the airtime hill, and the Heartline rolls, and the tunnel going up into the Immelman. I give the coaster's layout and ride experience a 5 out of 5. Now, coming in at just over a half mile long, and with a max height of only 160 feet, a bit of a cheated height at that, because you only hit 160 feet if you're sitting in the very back row. That is the height of the tilted track. So calling it 160 feet, a little bit of one of those moments of theme park marketing where the truth is flexed a bit. So overall, I'll give the stats of the ride a 4 out of 5. Nothing to shake a stick at, a 160-foot coaster coming in about just over a half mile long. In the park that it's at, those numbers are in the mid-tier. Between the 2 train operations and the mandatory lockers, for capacity and operations, I got to give the coaster a low 3 out of 5. The lockers are actually well done. I can't complain about the way the lockers are implemented, but I can complain that I don't think the ride needs lockers. If you can ride on Maverick with a fanny pack, you should be able to ride on Siren's Curse with the fanny pack too. Overall, I would rate Siren's Curse at Cedar Point a 4 out of 5. It's a great ride with a killer layout, whose primary problems are off-ride problems, political problems, friction between the coaster and the rest of the park, not friction between the coaster and the rider. If you're at Cedar Point and you want to ride as many rides as you can in one day, you can easily get 3 or 4 other solid coasters in during the time that you will stand and wait for Siren's Curse, Fastlane or not. But Siren's Curse is such a solid ride that you do owe it to yourself to experience it at least once. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving me a like, hitting the subscribe button to let me and YouTube know that I'm doing a good job, sharing with a friend if you think somebody else you know might like roller coasters or might like watching a big, bald, bearded guy yap at his camera for 20 minutes at a time. I try to come out with at least 1 video a week, all coaster-related content, occasionally flat rides if I feel like it, all thrill ride content, let's say that. So if you want to see me keep coming back, go ahead and hit subscribe, and I'll show up next week. In the meantime, thank you again for spending your time watching my video. I've been Josef, Vertical Drop Viking out.